Pick any time in human history, and I guarantee you that music of some form was used in a specific capacity. In the context of human civilization and culture, we normally tend to link music to activities such as marriage, religious ceremonies, and stories about life and death interpreted through different cultural lenses, but for whatever reason, we hardly ever link music with war. I wonder why that is, especially when music has played integral roles in warfare. For example, the ancient Greeks were led into battles by sounds of flutes. The songs played were used to uplift the troops. Patriotic music was used to remind the troops of the purpose of their ongoing sacrifices. From positive roles such as helping soldiers cope with traumas and stress, to more sinister uses such as torture and interrogations, it's fair to say music has played a role on and off the battlefield. In ancient warfare, the Greeks and the Romans used brass and percussive instruments to convey messages as they marched, as well as within camps. Music was the backbone of the stories poets recited to the troops to strengthen their morale by emboldening them with heroic stories from the past. Niccolo Machiavelli informed his commanding officers to issue orders by trumpet as the piercing sounds could be heard over the havoc of the conflict. Like a modern-day music producer, he arranged the instruments based on the purpose they served. Drums and flutes were used to maintain formation during the marches and control the movement of the soldiers on the battlefield. Just as soldiers had different roles in battle, so did the music and the soundscape it created. Trumpets used to inform the cavalry could not sound the same as the ones used to convey a message to the infantry. He used music as a way to orchestrate tactics on the battlefield. Let's fast track to the modern day era. No longer are troops led to the dueling grounds by means of flute or trumpet. These days, they are psyching themselves up by playing songs that gets them pumped, hyped and ready to go. Just ask Robert O'Neill, the Navy SEALs who holds the title for killing Osama bin Laden. According to him, a song called Red Nation by hip-hop artist The Game was the choice of motivation. War is unpredictable. What's even more unpredictable are the rules of engagement. War is both physically and psychologically taxing. The sound of hope, the sound of freedom. If you can't beat your opponent into submission, slap them with the bass until they surrender. Well, that's what South Korea apparently attempted when tensions increased with their neighbors. And the cause of this? An apology or lack of. North Korea had launched an attack against South Korea. After demanding an apology from the North, which fell on deaf ear, South Korea decided to retaliate by blasting various K-pop songs at high volumes across the demilitarized zone. If that wasn't bad enough, the songs were laced with anti-North propaganda. In this example, though less invasive, popular music that most people probably play and dance to all day long was used as a weapon of propaganda. With this weapon, although the body count may have been zero, morale casualty by fatigue takes the point. Music as a fuel to power the propaganda machine can be traced throughout history. Governments have used music as a way to mobilize and coordinate patriotic, nationalistic, and other forms of political movement. Let's head over to Hitler's Germany. Hitler and his propaganda expert Goebbels are hard at work figuring out new ways to promote the idea of Germans being the superior race, the creme de la creme of humanity. Worried about outside disturbance, they decided to ban anything beyond the German sphere of influence. Mingling with other cultures was clearly a no-no. They couldn't risk contaminating a petri dish while experimenting, creating a superior race. Goebbels understood the power of music and the authority it commanded over people. He stated, "Music affects the heart and emotions more than intellect. Where then could the heart of a nation beat stronger than in the huge masses in which the heart of the nation has founded its true home?" People still needed to be entertained, so they started promoting selective music that could aid their agenda. A favorite was German composer Richard Wagner. Wagner was influential as well as controversial due to his anti-Semitic writings, which made him even more credible in the eyes of Hitler. Indoctrination through entertainment is nothing special, nothing new. The message was subtly being planted, watered, and guided through the consciousness of the masses. Ronald Reagan tried to employ similar tactics during his presidential campaign, highlighting his patriotism. His choice of music was Bruce Springsteen's Born in the USA. Unfortunately, his campaign team misunderstood the message of the song as it was actually a critique of the Vietnam War. Up until now, the examples presented so far have been cases of the military using music as a means of propaganda. Warning, it gets darker from this point onwards as we get into situations involving irritation, interrogation, and torture. Let's switch it up. You are a federal agent in a 51-day Waco siege. As a way to break the deadlock between the Branch Davidians, the officer in charge hand you a list of music to play. The tactic here is to smoke them out by irritating them to death, forcing them out of their compound that they are held in. You go through the list. Your selection includes Nancy Sinatra's These Boots Are Made for Walking, Billy Ray Cyrus' Achy Breaky Heart, as well as a healthy variety of Christmas carols by Mitch Miller. Unfortunately, the siege ended in a deadly fire, killing over 80 people. A similar scenario was used during the 1989 Christmas Day US Cyclops mission to extract Panama's then leader, Manuel Noriega, from his place of sanctuary inside the Vatican Embassy in Panama. The music on rotation included Guns N' Roses' Welcome to the Jungle, songs by Van Halen, and Rick Astley's Never Gonna Give Up. Before making this video, I never imagined music being used in such an iniquitous way. It's debatable, but I'm sure you've all heard people say music is a universal language, so I can't lie. It rocks my world to discover how music has been shaped into a staple weapon of war. I thought music was used to lift spirits, not break them. I thought it spoke to us, not interrogated us. I thought it was a form of liberation and not confinement. Obviously, music isn't to blame, but it does highlight the psychological power which has been exploited, resulting in deeply disturbing situations. If you were a child in the 90s, you might remember the Charles program, Barney and Friends. You know that purple dinosaur, always smiling, giving out hugs. You remember the theme song. I can hear the memory cogs turning as you sing along. No harm, right? Wrong. Turns out this dinosaur caused a lot of psychological damage during the American occupation of Iraq and Afghanistan in the 2000s. Like me, confusion probably caused your face to scrunch up. Take a minute to relax those muscles. We are just scratching the surface of how our favorite songs have been weaponized. During these times, as a form of torture to inflict maximum psychological damage, the US Army would endlessly loop the theme songs on full blast day and night during sieges to force their opponents into surrendering as the songs became unbearable. It has been reported that its simplistic nature causes severe irritation and mental torture. Let's explore an even more sinister method of music as a form of torture. Let's take a trip to Guantanamo Bay detention camp and the Abu Ghraib prison. Within these camps, torture methods include sleep deprivation and waterboarding, amongst other forms of known inhumane, humiliating, physical and sexual abuses. One form of torture that doesn't necessarily make its rounds in these conversations is music. Music as a torture weapon, used to interrogate detainees. The account of the Tipton Three, 3 British citizens held in Guantanamo Bay for about 2 years, details the ordeal detainees endured within these camps. Many horrific incidents were brought to light, but for the purpose of this video, we will concentrate on how music was used to psychologically break detainees. They described how they were shackled and forced to sit in awkward positions in complete isolation inside tiny rooms, engulfed in a frightening stillness of darkness, unable to anticipate what they will soon be subjected to. Then without warning, that stillness was overpowered by a burst of music blaring through at dangerously high volumes, literally slapping them in the face as the sound source was intentionally positioned directly at them. They mentioned this happened on a daily basis for hours on end. To reinforce the irritation of the music, songs were continuously randomized. Imagine a playlist on loop full of tracks you despise. With that in mind, place yourself in one of these dark, isolated rooms and in an intense atmosphere. This is everything but a party. Let's talk about this playlist. Before name dropping any songs, I wonder how many of them will appear on any of our own playlists. Here we go. Drum roll please. Skinny Puppy, Eminem, Queens, Christina Aguilera, Dr. Dre, The Bee Gees, Meatloaf, David Gray, Dope, Marilyn Manson, and Rage Against the Machine. The Tipton Three would go on to report the effectiveness of musical torture, stating it was so effective that prisoners confessed the crimes that they weren't even involved with just to make it stop. Fortunately, after news broke and evidence began circulating, many musicians condemned the use of their music in these torture operations. Many notable names signed a petition in protest. This is a very powerful statement. Imagine, you could be sued by record companies if you sample a track and didn't get it cleared properly. So in my view, it's great to see artists standing up for the misuse of their music. Apparently, Canadian electro band Skinny Puppy demanded the US government paid $666,000 for using using their music without their consent and also as a weapon against somebody. Unfortunately, not all musicians felt the same. In an online news article, Welcome to the Disco, published by The Guardian, co-founder of Metallica, James Hetfield, is quoted saying, "If the Iraqis ain't used to freedom, then I'm glad to be a part of the exposure. We've been punishing our parents, our wives, our loved ones with this music forever. Why should the Iraqis be any different?" Was he joking? Was he serious? Was what he said taken out of context? As the article suggests, was he naive or ignorant? I can't speak for him. It does pose a question. Do people actually understand the seriousness of music torture? It sounds like a joke, music torture. Two words that sound crazy next to each other. Music connects you to your culture or severs you from it. It is music's capacity to take over your mind and invade your inner experiences that makes it so terrifying. Beautifully put by Thomas Kean, director of the Human Rights Project at Bard College. Music is culture, therefore by default it provides us with a cultural identity. Being able to deliberately exploit this knowledge creates distance and dilutes one from their roots. This is one of the many aims of music torture. The intention of futility music is to psychologically wear down the detainees, chipping away at what they are familiar with and then suffocating them in a culture so foreign to them, in this case American culture. The constant sound of mainly hard rock and heavy metal can break down anyone's mental wall, let alone people that have never been exposed to such songs before. Music torture in intense doses can be a form of mental abuse. Daniel Levitin, a psychological professor and author of This Is Your Brain on Music, stated, "Our brains automatically process music and try to figure out what comes next. Any Western music would have done the trick. These were tonal structures the detainees' brains couldn't figure out. They kept trying and they kept failing. Just as if I made you listen to Chinese opera, I'd probably drive you crazy." Research conducted by Suzanne Cusick, professor of music at New York University, also suggested that playing loud music for a prolonged amount of time can overload various sensory faculties, causing disorientation and in some cases hallucination. Those subjected to this form of psychological breakdown find it difficult to distinguish reality from fiction, hence giving fake testimonies and false confessions to interrogators. I've heard of shady business deals and unfair contracts, but up until now I can't say I knew how music was being weaponized and manufactured into an instrument of war. The extent to which this is happening is still somewhat unknown, but to celebrate the positive effects music has on a brain and then make light of the negative impact is deplorable. Even music has a dark side that needs to be addressed. Imagine your creation was used in a nefarious manner. How would you feel? Would you protest or co-sign? Let me know below.